Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 354th episode of Constructed Criticism. I am your tried and true your host, Mason, joined by special co-host Abe Stein, filling in for Allie while Allie's off doing taxes and family stuff. Abe, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Mason. How are you?
I'm doing good. I just got home from work. I'm excited to record this podcast. Today's topic of the active improving at Magic is one that I'm really excited about. I know that's something that you and I have recently had some talks one-on-one on in groups as well. So it's been really cool to have you on and get this. And I want to thank you once again for coming on and taking over the slot for Allie when she had the busy stuff come up. And Abe, can I regale the people with your accolades?
I would love nothing more. I love hearing about myself.
Well,
it's been like a dream of mine to be on a Magic podcast for a long time.
Constructive Criticism was the episode for you, my friend. So as you might have heard throughout the podcast's history, Abe is a SCG grinder. It's a friend of Allie and ours. Actually placed one place higher than Allie last year on the SCG leaderboard, bumping Allie out of buys, which he brings up a couple times. So daggers all around there. Abe has been playing Magic for a long time, was just about to graduate college, I guess, even though you're kind of in the last bit of the semester, doesn't really matter. You played on 2 pro tours, and I was told threw away one of the best decks going into it because, quote, we thought the mana was bad. So, Abe, we're happy to have you on.
I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. So, Abe, we're going to go into the always improving segment of the show. The point of the show is you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And we try to always work on something in our lives. And, that can be in and outside of Magic. And so I'll start things off since, I'm the funniest one here and the host. And my always improving moment this week really comes down to actually stepping away from Magic a little bit and realizing that I was kind of getting burnt out and felt in a rut about every time doing things that I really wanted to do. And when I was playing Magic, to have fun playing Magic and to play decks I wanted to play, and not just the thing that I thought was the highest percentage chance to win. Because I could feel myself getting like this kind of rut and this kind of like, I don't want to say foul mood with Magic, but more so like, oh, this is like really tiresome. This isn't fun. I'm just like not enjoying what I'm doing. And I'm like, the results aren't showing as well. I'm clearly in like a bad spot. So I need to take some time, enjoy myself when I'm playing it, so I streamed a lot of fun decks and historic. I played a lot of modern prowess, which I love playing red prowess. It's a weird thing that happened pre-quarantine, Abe. I would never touch a prowess deck. Post-quarantine, I'm all about prowess. You can't get me stopped. And I've played like 8 leagues or whatever. It's a bizarre thing. I just randomly decided like I should try this deck. It always does so well. And then I was like, dang, this is a blast. I love doing this. So did a bunch of that and played a bunch of Valorant and just kind of chilled. And I'm excited to hop. You can't get me stopped. And I've played like 8 leagues or whatever. It's a bizarre thing. I just randomly decided like I should try this deck. It always does so well. And then I was like, dang, this is a blast. I love doing this. So did a bunch of that and played a bunch of Valorant and just kind of chilled. And I'm excited to hop back in things. I was looking up the SCG for this weekend to see what the format is. I'm excited to go. So that was my always improving moment.
So my always improving moment. I really like this segment. I really do. I spent a lot of last week kind of also very disengaged with Magic for different reasons. I was kind of sad about it. I've been really into this limited format. Wanted to play like the Arena Open, wanted to play the PTQs, but just stuff came up and I couldn't. But what I did have time for was to play a bunch of Mario Kart and like on like a fresh file. I don't know if you know anything about Mario Kart, but when you like to unlock things, usually you have to like play these Grand Prix, which are like 4 tracks or whatever. And like I'm really good at the game and it's a fresh file. So I was like, I'm going to get on like the hard difficulties. I'm like back to the start, even though it's the 4th one and I could just be done. Like, I think that's just like, that's a really awesome, like thing to make sure you keep doing. Cause it's really easy to get lazy and be like, oh, it's good enough, but to really like grind out and like get the 100%. I don't know. There's something about it.
That's great. Yeah. I definitely know that feeling of like wanting to complete a max out and also give it your all. It's like, well, it's like 98% isn't 100. Like I can do the 100. It's not out of my reach. I need to go back in there.
Yeah, and then actually since like today, because I had a long conversation with my good friend Jonathan Sukenik.
Can't beat him.
Who's like he's kind of like my Magic mentor, honestly. Like I've had a couple through the years. It's just kind of how it is. You like find a group and you like click with them. But he was talking about how he was finally coming back to Modern with the bands, and he was like playing a little bit, and he had like some ideas, and I just realized that like he started winning more, and he started playing like more stock decks, but he he's known for like playing Jeskai in Modern, despite it being like bad and like
it drives me up the wall. I gotta say this. I've played Sukenik a fair amount of times now. I've never beat Sukenik ever. He always plays the Jeskai deck. It's always like a pretty even matchup, if not favored me. I just get trounced every time. I just cannot beat Sukenik in anything. He's like my kryptonite. Keep going, but this guy really knows.
Yeah,
like he's so good at those decks. It's insane.
He's just an absolutely fantastic Magic player. One of the smartest people I know, and he was like, yeah, I'm like trying these things. Like, I think I disagree with people on like how they're evaluating certain cards and like the format and like the way that people should be building things. I was like, wow, like I don't have that skill set at all. Like, I kind of am just like still making sure I get down like my technical play all the time, and like I know where I want to be in the format and what's going on, and like so I don't have that skill set at all. Like, I kind of am just like still making sure I get down like my technical play all the time, and like I know where I want to be in the format and what's going on, and like so I took some time and I just started brewing. Like, he said like something about like, oh, maybe like a zombies deck. Like, there's a lot of tools there that are not explored, so like maybe I'll do that. And I was like, I'm gonna do that. So then today I've just been like going through the deck building process, like starting from an idea of like, okay, like Gravecrawler, Carrion Feeder, like like Undead Augur, this kind of like package of like sack outlets and recursive creatures, and like what can you do with that that's not being done in Modern that like could be different, you never know. Crypt Breaker was an entire option for for Hogak's sideboard plan against Leyline, like,
yeah, and it was good.
You never know what comes up, and I just think there's a lot to learn, especially when there's a format that's so big like Modern. I definitely feel like I've learned a lot just today, and like, okay, like, so do I start big by pulling every option and all the colors and like thinking about what it is that I want to do? Like, do I want to have red for like some Croxes or like, Blood Moon or something in the sideboard? Or do I want to have white so I can have like Tide Hallow Sculler and Luris if like if I even want to have Luris, if I want to have like a Yawgmoth combo thing going on? Do I want to have like what's that card? Fiend Artisan. Like, do I want to be just straight mono black? How many lands do I want to play? What, like, do I want Mutavaults? Like, all of these things are just things you have to think about. And I've never really taken the time to think about from an entirely new idea. And I feel like my brain has grown 3 sizes.
I love it. That's sick. Yeah, those sort of things are really exciting too, right? When you have those moments. And it's also a skill that's hard to exercise, right? Because it's one of those things that most likely going to this. Abe's not thinking like, I'm going to actually break it with zombies. Like, like the odds of it happening are pretty low. But the act of doing that and the potential is there, right? Like, when you're saying that, I thought like there have been a lot of zombie cards that have been printed during the same time as like Modern Horizons, Oko, and Uro, and that sort of stuff's pushed everything out. And we're kind of like, hey, those 8-9 months never happened now. Let's explore Modern again with all these new cards. There's a lot of things that could be there, so there could definitely be something. And the act of doing that, I think, is super good and rewarding, even though it's hard, right? Because it's so many times you feel like, oh, maybe this isn't worth exploring to its fullest, Like humans. Like, people talked that there was a humans deck for a while, and then it took, I can't remember the Moto Grinder, but there was a Moto Grinder, and then Collins Mullins, changed the list a little bit and took it to an open, and now humans has been a mainstay of the format for 3, almost 4 years now. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, exactly. It was a deck people were like, do we need to ban something? Like,
yeah.
And you never get there, like the Sam Blacks of Magic. There was that thread a couple of days ago where it was like, tag like best players who aren't like in the Hall of Fame, and obviously I tagged myself. Not true, I didn't, but
you tagged me.
And like Sam said that. Yeah, it says in the script that I tagged you.
God, I love the script.
Like, Sam responded and he was like, yeah, like I see my name come up a lot here, but I think that's just like not true. I don't think I have the processing power and like the ability to hold all these pieces of info in my head and like, like to do all these things that make you a really like Hall of Fame tier Magic player. But what I do that's different is that I like really just explore everything that I can, and I like go through this creative process.
Yeah.
And like that is something that is a part of the game. Like, as much as you can have success, and a lot of people do, without ever building an original deck or whatever, something I learned at my first PT was like, you come in the Wild West, you've got to come with something good. Like, you can't and there's nothing to tell you, right? There's only 2 events or something. It's early in a format. You got 2 events of information. Everyone else is trying to break it. Like,
and they're hiding their information too, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
If they're there, they're almost assuredly like if there is something really good, it's almost assuredly not public.
Yeah, it's so easy to get lost in those moments and be like, I don't know where to turn, I don't know what to do, and kind of end up making a decision that isn't as well thought out or something you didn't really put process into because you didn't have the tools to. I know I didn't at my first PT, and like it was such an open format, and I like think I was like heading in the right direction, but I had 4 days or whatever from the invitational to the PT. So it was like, what am I supposed to do? I just kind of registered something that like looked fine with numbers I liked, and I played an entirely mediocre deck. And if you want to not play a mediocre deck, or even build not mediocre decks, do things that are really exciting or just creative in Magic, I think that's a skill you really have to work on. That's like it's a process you have to build.
100%. Yeah, I think that's super true, and that's super important. Even with PTs being a couple weeks out now, I think that still comes up to an extent, even with all the information we have. And I think one thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about all this that's really important is sometimes what happens is you find out there aren't the pieces there, right? So Abe might finish with this zombie deck and be like, dang, if I just had like my Thalia's Lieutenant type card, thing that I could play and ump the team and push, if I just had that, then maybe my deck would be great. And then, 9 months from now, the new Innistrad set drops, and there's the zombie Thalia Lieutenant that's brought back from the dead, and he does the exact same thing for zombies, and Abe's like, oh my gosh, that's it. And that might be the thing, and he's already done the work for that. And you also get new context for the format too, right? Like when you are playing these things that are a little weirder, it helps recontextualize things, not so much like, oh, what do I need to be signed? Abe's like, oh my gosh, that's it. And that might be the thing, and he's already done the work for that. And you also get new context for the format too, right? Like when you are playing these things that are a little weirder, it helps recontextualize things, not so much like, oh, what do I need to be sideboarding? Which sometimes is what comes down to a lot of Modern. You're like, you have your deck that you play, it's totally fine to serviceable. What do I sideboard for what else is going on? This gives you a whole new light for everything too. So,
yeah, I'll say that nothing really teaches you about how, like, what the weaknesses or strengths of, like, what any deck is, other than, like, beating it in ways you didn't think were possible. Like, when you, like, really beat, like, I played some 2-mans before we recorded. I was playing some 2-mans with my zombie brew, and I played against Bant, like, control, like Bant Stoneblade, and game 1, they just natty, like, Dork, Sword of Feast and Famine, and I die. And then games 2 and 3, I just ground them out. I was like, no, I'm going to Liliana of the Veiled Edict. No pressure. It just had no way to, like, really... We get in these spots where it's like, okay, I'm top decking with, like, a Gravecrawler or 2 around, and they just couldn't beat it.
Yeah.
And that's telling. When things like that happen, it's telling of, like, okay, maybe, like, if you just, like, maybe if you could find a way to make Hollow 1 work again, that deck would be good if the control decks are good, because, like, they can't deal with the recursive threats. Things like that.
Yeah,
you just really learn a lot from just playing the games, even weird ones. I think the weird games probably teach you the most, actually.
Yeah, especially if you're looking for it. You're not just like, wow, my cards suck,
Yeah, you really reflect on a match with your, like, weird... You're like, wow, like, why was that game close? Like, my deck sucks. And you're like, wait, like, why was it close,
Mm-hmm.
Think about that, and I think... I don't know. Just think about what you do, and I think you get a lot of places.
Big agree. Well, we're going to move on to the Patreon question of the week. This is all about the bans. We unfortunately didn't get to do our big ban and restricted announcement episode of everything. But Abe, I don't know if you heard while you were out and about doing your stuff and unable to play Magic, but they banned like 15 cards. And
I did hear that.
Yeah, so let's just kind of quickly go through the formats and give our thoughts and maybe what if you have any ideas about what could be going on there. Let's start with Historic. Just Uro left. They officially banned Omnath, since apparently Omnath was on the suspended list, so Omnath could have potentially come back, but Omnath's gone and Uro's gone. And I gotta say, the Historic format's crazy since then. Everyone's playing. There's like Vampire decks doing great. We've seen Ashley's Little Crush with. We've seen Sacrifice decks rise up. We've seen Control decks rise up. Do you play much Historic, Abe, and do you have any real thoughts on it? I know that's a format that Allie really likes.
Yeah, so I only really play Historic when it's the qualifying season for like I played Sultai in the last arena qualifier, but I do watch Allie stream occasionally, and I like keep tabs on what's going on, and it does seem kind of like a cool Wild West format where a lot of things are happening. I do watch Allie stream occasionally, and I like keep tabs on what's going on. And it does seem kind of like a cool Wild West format where a lot of things are happening. There's like, Goblins is like this boogeyman deck, and like Sack's really good. But Uro is just like such a problem. I don't even know if it's necessarily a huge problem for Historic in the way that like was bigger than other formats where Uro is a problem, but it just the Uro problem is so real. And I like that we're seeing Historic in a place where we can see, okay, is Rakdos Sacrifice dominant? Like, was it just the Uro deck, the Sultai deck, keeping it down? Is there another deck that can play the answers that can like bring the format to balance, or are we gonna have to see some change to that in like a couple months? I think that my biggest thing as someone who doesn't play Historic is I like the approach they're taking to Historic, a small format with a couple of problematic cards and like plenty of power to keep everything in check. Like Uro's gone. A lot of people only thing to be doing that aren't that. I don't know. I think it's better. Do you have much expert Historic opinion to tell me I'm wrong or right?
My thing is right now I have seen, even though I haven't played as much of it, I picked up Sacrifice a little bit and just could not lose. It was funny too because I realized I didn't update my sideboard, so I had a bunch of cards for Uro, and I just kept forgetting to update because I would like play a game and then log off, and I had like no pathways on my deck, so my mana was bad. And then I like updated my deck and just like clean sweeped 5 matches in a row, just like no problems. All my opponent had hate, various different forms of hate that I had to have answers for. Just had a sideboard built to beat hate basically only, with like a few other small changes for like mirror stuff, and it was like, dang, this deck is strong. Is it beatable? Probably, but that deck is a real contender, and I think if you're looking to play Historic and you're looking to do that, that's sort of the format. That's the deck you have to start with. Like, can your deck beat Sacrifice? You have to start with like, can your deck beat Sacrifice? Am I doing a worse thing that Sacrifice is trying to do? And if I'm beating Sacrifice, how do I beat how they're going to try and beat me? Because they actually have a fair amount of tools for the answers out there. I think it's Feed the Swarm is the 2 mana answer enchantment or creature.
Yeah.
That's really that card was not super great against like the Sultai stuff, but has turned into like a real answer for a lot of problematic stuff. So
yeah, it's like the other Abrade, right? Like you get Abrade to be like, oh, I can like kill this creature if I need to, or if you have Cage, I can kill it. And then this is just like, well, if you have Leyline, I can kill it, and if you have creatures, I can kill them. Which is like just the splash in the other direction from the black card. Sounds great.
Yeah, I've definitely had moments where I was like, my opponent can either have Leyline or Cage, and I was like, but they all have creatures, so I'll bring both then. And I'll just hope I draw the right one when you draw the right one. So yeah,
that sounds really messed up.
Yeah.
I should probably start playing that deck if I have to play Historic anytime soon.
Yeah, it's quite strong. And it's cool to see stuff like blue after bans. Normally, after a ban announcement, there's nothing that really happens for a couple weeks because normally it's at the beginning of a format. So formats look really cool, and then there becomes reasons to play them and be the most efficient deck possible. And it's like, oh, this format isn't as cool as we thought it was once we like actually try to put pressure on it. So I'm curious to see what happens with Historic with a lot of pressure, because I could see it being like the Gruul blue-white Rakdos format with goblins. Like I could see that being the timeline we live in.
Yeah.
But only time will tell on that. And we have I think we have like a month before there's even anything big for Historic. So,
yeah, it kind of feels. I remember the Lotus Box Invitational, like at the in the early days of the quarantine. When I qualified for that was the first time I ever touched Historic, and there was like one tournament by the Mythic Society, and like Gruul did really well and was like considered the best deck, and then these like Nexus decks just kind of like won anyway.
Yeah,
and then like we had the Lotus Box Invitational, and it was just like Nexus decks just kind of like won anyway.
Yeah.
And then like we had the Lotus Box Invitational, and it was just like more than half the field Nexus, I think, of like the 12 people. I think it was like almost all Nexus and then like a couple Gruul.
Yeah, there were only 2 decks across like 12 people. You had Gruul and Nexus, and that was it.
But I played a bunch of Gruul to just be like, okay, like what am I gonna like? While I was trying to figure it out, see what people are playing on the ladder in Historic, and that was the first time I hit Mythic. Actually, I just like did it in one day. I was accidentally the first person there. I remember Fire Shoes like dunked on someone who was like, I beat so and so there, or like so and so beat me there, and he's like, well, actually, both of you were like 3 or 4 hours later than Abe, who like finished like a long time ago.
That's funny.
But yeah, but then as soon as like people start to have incentives, there's tournaments, people stop being like, oh, I'm going to play my Johnny's Pride Mate deck. like have some fun and start being like, I'm gonna bully you. And then
if you met my friend Mayhem Devil, he would like to meet your creatures. Pioneer had a pretty huge shakeup. We saw basically the Upsal spell deck get banned out of the format. That doesn't exist anymore. Teferi, Wilderness Reclamation, and Uro all left as well. And that format seems kind of wild since then. I've been playing Burn in it, and I've liked Burn, but I don't think it's particularly great. It just seems like a fine week 1 deck or whatever. Turns out I'm a Burn guy now, Abe. Since you've been gone, I've adopted red in all the formats.
I think Burn guy is a really healthy phase for any Magic player to have.
You got to have your. It's like college, you know. You got to experiment.
I also own Pioneer Burn, and you know, maybe we'll hit the trenches together.
Yeah, it'd be sick.
We saw but I have a lot of feelings. I have a lot of feelings on the Pioneer ban in general, because I have a lot of feelings on Pioneer. I'm kind of like,
I would love to hear them, because I don't have a lot of feelings on the format in general, so this would be great to fill airtime. So
like, Pioneer has had this big identity problem that has entirely been fueled by design mistakes in my mind. It started out and it was this like, oh, you know, like Oath of Nissa, like the Mono Green Devotion deck was really awesome and powerful, and they're like, okay, that's a little too much. They kind of like reined it in with those bans. And then slowly but surely, every card from 2019 or 2020 that was good was too good, with the exception of Inverter, which was kind of like the Splinter Twin of the format. And unlike Splinter Twin in Modern, which I think should stay banned, because, I mean, maybe now you could unban it with Fourth Nation, but it's just so, you don't want to do it. It's going to be so miserable. Think about your decisions when you talk about these things, people. But I think Inverter is the twin that needs to be unbanned. Because that deck, I think Dig Through Time was just too good. And we've kind of just seen them say like, oh, you know, we had this format that had an identity where you could play these cool combo decks, but the twin deck was the best because it had the best interaction and the combo. And then we banned all the combos instead of like banning the thing that made the combo really consistent in the one combo control deck. So like, I guess they've kind of continued leaning on this side of like, well, the only thing that gets to exist is Lotus Field. Like, that's the only combo deck we want. No more Oopsal spells. Like, that's off the table. And then the classic Teferi is keeping Wilderness Reclamation in check. So both of those are off the list. But like, I just think overall the problem with Pioneer is kind of the problem. I guess it's not really a problem with Historic, because Historic is kind of fresh with the Jumpstart cards and like it has like some weird additions. But like, Pioneer has just been this place where the banned standard decks go to like live on. It's like Beyond the Rainbow Bridge for cards that got banned last year. Like, you have people playing Luca Fires, and you have people playing like Omnath like Ultimatum decks and like Reclamation Shark decks. You know, it's just miserable. Reclamation Shark decks. You know, it's just miserable. Because the reason those things are banned is because they suck to play with and against. They're so annoying. Like, no one likes playing those games anymore. Everyone was like kind of tolerating it, and then we're really, really happy when it was banned. It's also still the same Uro gameplay. So now I think that hopefully this gives some breathing room to like let the format breathe again. If they decide that, if Wizards has decided, which it seems like they have, that they just don't want it to be a format where people play these cool combo decks. I honestly love Inverter. I think that deck was like, you'd play some of the weirdest, craziest games in Magic with like Inverter of Truth as like a fair card, or like just like down to the numbers of like, what are your odds to draw certain cards once you like remake your deck. And like, it was just so fun that I wish it would come back. But if they decide it's this way, it's much better without Uro, because in a format where you can't have combo decks, Uro is just the best thing by a lot. And like, like, or like Niv was the best thing by a lot, and then it got Uro. Like, you just, it's just, if it's going to be a value mid-range, like everyone can play their cards they kind of like format, it's got to be that. And I think a lot of the things that are really oppressive to that are off now. They're off now. They're all sent away. And I'm excited to see how it shapes up. I hope that they really do think about, 'cause it just feels like it's a matter of time until like someone figures out the right build for Lotus combo, and then like, or like Dig Through Time is a ticking time bomb. And I hope that if they ever ban Dig Through Time, that they unban Inverter.
Yeah, I also wonder about like Citadel and stuff, right? Like, we've seen the Jund Citadel deck do pretty well in Historic, and we saw Kane actually pilot a version of it to second place in this past Pioneer Challenge over the weekend, losing to Burn. And like that is like a combo deck too, right? Like it plays really differently and has a lot of stuff on the battlefield, but like at what point do we decide we can have a bunch of combo decks in the format? Because we clearly have a bunch of things that do combo-esque stuff, you know?
Yeah. The thing that I really don't want to see for Pioneer is that every time it is this cool, like, make it happen card, and then someone makes it happen in the competitive format, that it gets banned. That's what I don't want to have happen. And that's kind of what it feels like happened with Inverter to me. And that's kind of what I don't really see it with that Citadel deck, the Jun deck. I've seen Kane play a lot of it before he stopped playing. He like took a pretty big break from playing Pioneer.
Mm-hmm.
He would stream a bunch of it. I'm a huge fan of his stream.
Love Kane.
Yeah, he's awesome. And so, like, I think the deck is like pretty beatable. It's like not like so busted it's gonna like take over the format. But it is a deck that is doing something unfair. It's kind of using the Collected Company Catacomb Sifter, like, you know, like Woe Strider sacrifice package that exists, and then doing it in this creative way where it turns Bolas' Citadel into like you're dead.
Yeah, it does, like where Inverter was like
package that exists, and then doing it in this creative way where it turns Bolas' Citadel into like you're dead.
Yeah, it does, like where Inverter was like a combo control deck. This is like a beatdown combo deck, you know? And I wonder, like, how often or how long can we tread the line of, like, this deck, like, how do I beat this deck? You know what I mean? Like, eventually it gets enough pieces, or we figure out the right way to configure the pieces where, like, decks can't beat both game plans consistently and becomes miserable to play against. You know?
Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit of my own personal, like, heuristic about it, but it's just generally... The reason Inverter is such a problem is because it got to play all of the good interactive spells, right? It's that it gets to play every good answer and this combo that is also kind of proactive. Mm-hmm. So, like, forcing people to answer a deck that's entirely already a good reactive deck, playing all the good tools, impossible. That's why Twin was too good. That's why Inverter was too good.
Sure.
Like, just has all the best cards. But I think you can give it a little more leeway and a little more time for people to adapt to a deck. It's like, it's going to have to put creatures in play and like push the game forward, and you can set them back because it spends a lot of time in play.
Sure, totally fair, totally reasonable too. Modern, this is the biggest one. Mystic Sanctuary, Field of the Dead, Uro, and something else got banned, and then the Cascade rule got changed, so Cascade doesn't work silly face ways with Tybalt and etc. and company. There's something else banned in Modern that I feel like was kind of big, but maybe not as big as I'm thinking.
Simeon Spirit Guide.
Simeon Spirit Guide, thank you. Yeah, they banned the fast mana card. What do you think about that format? Because, I mean, as we've seen over the weekend, we saw with the challenge, and then NRG put on an event, a PTQ/5K, and it looks like Modern, and, you know, some of this is like people falling back on known things, but it looks like it's Modern before Oko, but right after, like, the Hogak ban. And it looks kind of like it's that minus Urza, because there's no Mox Opal. And it's a really interesting play. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. I think those bannings are all Mox Opal. And it's a really interesting play. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. I think those bannings are all really good, by the way. I think all those cards needed to go. But...
I also love this banning. I might be like... I might have been okay with letting Tybalt's Trickery run around a little longer.
Oh,
and
Trickery got banned. Yeah.
Yeah, and like... Yeah. Yeah, so I'd have been fine with Trickery, like, run around a little longer and, like, figuring out if it's actually unbeatable or not. Like... But the fact that Wizards would have to be like, all right, we didn't ban it the first time because we weren't sure, and people were, like, having fun with it. But I think, like, the 2 weeks of Magic Online of people having fun with it was more than enough for anyone who wanted to. Like, if you were really interested in being Tybalt's Trickery Modern local guy after the pandemic, you had your chance. You had to go onto Magic Online, build the deck, and then play it through a bunch of leagues, and that's like 6 months of playing at your LGS where you just, like, make people upset with, like, hitting your Emrakul or whatever.
Yeah.
It just doesn't add anything, so I'm okay with it being gone. I think they put, like, Snapcaster Mage for the longest time was, like, this staple of, like, you are a reactive blue deck. And, like, the way that you're able to compete in the format is you have this redundancy from Snapcaster Mage that also serves as a way to, like, turn the corner, said Jeskai guy. Like, you know, you Snapcaster your Lightning Helix against the burn deck and, like, kill their last creature, and then suddenly you're, like, you have your Cryptic Command up, you've got, like, a clock in play, like, the Celestial Colonnade, the Cavalry's on the way with Celestial Colonnade, like, it's all happening. Mm. But, like, that was entirely reduced to this pattern of, like, okay, I'm just going to Cryptic Command you every turn with Mystic Sanctuary and a way to draw a card. which was just miserable, and the fact that such a powerful effect could be enabled by playing one land was just not okay.
Yeah, and a fetchable land too. I think I would not be surprised if we maybe see a Mystic Sanctuary in the future that doesn't have island on it, and I think that's way different while still strong than I think I would not be surprised if we maybe see a Mystic Sanctuary in the future that doesn't have island on it, and I think that's way different while still strong than having like this one where it's like, yeah, we have like 2 or 3 of these in our deck. We pick them up all the time, and we have 14 copies of them because we have all these fetches. Like, it's really absurd. It's really strong, along with all the powerful blue cards we got, right? And when I haven't mentioned it really, but I've mentioned a lot past in the podcast. But I think the thing that Uro does is it becomes the only thing you need to win. Like once you have Uro, it's really about not dying. And once you have Mystic Sanctuary or a Cryptic, it's really hard for any deck to overcome you and not lose to the other things you have going on too. So I'm really glad to see all that stuff banned. And then along with Field of the Dead, which I think was just probably too good. I really wonder. I know that you don't test for older formats, but I think they just thought Field of the Dead was not as good as it was. And Primeval Titan really win the game in like a controlling fashion when your opponent has so many recursive and hard to interact with threats, and kind of pushed Modern in a weird place that was kind of fun to play. But I'm glad we're kind of back to. This is weird to say. I'm glad to see Tron, Karn on 3. That's the devil I know, and that's the one I love.
It felt like for a while Modern had become this format of like, it was like this format about either inevitability or like ending the game on turn 3. Like you had to be like really just murking your opponent, or you had to or you had Field of the Dead, Mystic Sanctuary, and Uro, and like you were trying to set up this every game is going to end the same way because inevitably I will do this and you will lose to it, which is just not, I think, the identity of that format.
Yeah.
Like it only exists on both ends of the spectrum, whereas before it was like, oh, I've got to be able to Karn on 3 so my opponent doesn't, play some spell that like puts me really far behind with my, like, that's my Tron deck. That's the whole thing. Or like, I can, play some spell that like puts me really far behind with my, like, that's my Tron deck. That's the whole thing. Or like, I need to, if I'm humans, I need to like kind of snowball a board position early and disrupt my opponent by like turn 3 so that they can't kill me super quick. And that was just entirely eliminated, kind of blasted on both ends by like Tybalt's Trickery, which is now gone, and these Uro decks.
Yeah, and
like
we also seen, we lost some combo decks like Ad Nauseam and stuff with the Spirit Guide leaving, but it's really weakened a lot of the other really degenerate combo stuff. Things like Tron are not like the end of the world, whatever. That stuff is beatable, and we've gotten more and more tools to beat it if you really want to beat it. And losing things like Spirit Guide really made a lot of the decks that could punk you feel less bad. And this is the best part of the ban, you never have to hear anyone say pitch Spirit Guide and do something. They'll all have to get a brand new joke. Now, what will that joke be? Less bad? And this is the best part of the ban, you never have to hear anyone say pitch Spirit Guide and do something. They'll all have to get a brand new joke. Now, what will that joke be? Who knows? And there's no way it's going to be as funny as I'll pitch Spirit Guide, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I just hope it's good. It never is, but I hope that joke's good. I'll miss Seaman Spirit Guide. When Modern first came out, I was actually playing Magic, and I remember being like, man, like, I wonder if there's like a way you could like make a Belcher deck, and then I've like seen the Belcher deck exist, like, I've like my Monkey's Paw wishes come to fruition over like 6 years or something, and I'm like, I hate it, get it out of here, I don't want it anymore. When it was bad, it was cooler. So as much as Simian Spirit Guide, I think we had some fun times, we had some fun conversations about its existence over the years. I salute it goodbye.
Yeah, it's funny. What I remember, and we'll move on after this to the main topic, but I remember people talking about banning Mox Opal Simian Spirit Guide. Around, get rid of all of them. And we've been just slowly chipping away at a lot of them. Yeah. And I don't, I was hesitant before, but I think we have enough tools and things that it's interesting to see how these things play out. And I don't think Simian Spirit Guide leaving is a huge thing that adds a lot of negatives to the format being gone now. And I think it's probably a good sign that like Simian Spirit Guide's gone and we're not going to like lose any sleep over it. But I don't know. Simian Spirit Guide's a weird card. It's cool to have things like that in the format. And I know Autumn wrote a big thread, if you're curious about this. Autumn talked about format identity for like 8 or 9 tweets. It ended with like, I guess I'm like pro dredge person now, but like formats need identities. But I think modern is more than just like you're dead on turn 3, which felt like the narrative back then, and now the narrative's changed, and so we're like changing what that means as well, which I think is cool. We're like kind of catering to a new norm, like changing what that means as well, which I think is cool. We're like kind of catering to a new norm, which is dope. And maybe someday Smear Spirit Guy comes back. Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't bet on it, but definitely seeing Uro gone from all of these formats. Like, Uro was kind of the Thragtusk problem when Thragtusk was a card, whereas like every game just kind of revolved around Thragtusk. Every game revolved around in all those formats. Everyone's deck building revolved around Uro.
And
I'm very happy it's gone.
Even if your deck didn't play Uro, you just had to have an accountability for Uro, you know?
Yeah, you had to have a plan. You had sideboard cards for Uro, the card, not for decks that play Uro, because that was all of them. You just had to have answers to that card because it was so problematic. And I think now, hopefully, we see the formats kind of move their own ways, grow outwards of each other. Nature is healing.
The world is better.
You know, all that.
Exactly. Uro was the virus. Thank you so much for that Patreon question. I know that was a little deeper. The bans are a bigger topic, and when there's 15 of them, it's gonna take a second there. But if you want to support the show outside of Patreon, you can modern. I've been picking up some of the human pieces for a while now, Abe, and so I've been completing that. I just need some Caverner Souls and some Meddling Mages, and I'm like basically done. Just a couple other uncommons after that. And you can use code CCMTG at checkout to get 5% off. I'm sorry, 4% off your order. And use code Would That Be Good for your very first order to get 15% off, which is actually how I got into Modern, Abe. I was a listener of the podcast, and I picked up all of Titan Shift in one big thing and saved a big chunk of money. So if you've been wanting to get into Modern or any of these formats we talked about, you know, I think IRL historic events will come when that time comes. You can pick up this stuff there. So go to Oasis Games and use that. And you can also go to our other sponsors. A brand new one for the network, sponsoring all the shows is GreatVikingGames.com. What they do is a kind of interesting service. We never really talked about on the show before, Abe. So you get to premiere that along with your premiere to Magic podcasting. Exciting day. They sell the codes for Arena. And so what that means is you can go there, and let's say you really loved the one of the Uro sleeves that went with that secret layer, but you don't want to spend the $40 because you're not going to play with the cards, and yeah, you want the sleeve, but Uro's banned. You don't really play Primeval Titan. You don't want Frost Titan. I'm not going to spend $40 on that. Instead, you can buy the code from them, which you can, I believe, also sell to them as well on their website if you have a code, and they sell it to you for like $7 or whatever. And so it becomes kind of just like a normal cosmetic that you could pick up and you get it right away. And they have that for all the secret layers. They also do that for packs, F&M codes as well, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of different stuff you can pick up there. So if you want to check out that, you can go to GreatVikingGames.com and look that up. And you can use code CCMTG at checkout to get 10% off your order. So you can pick some stuff up there. I have some Uro sleeves, and I'm going to give them away here very soon, I think, on the CC podcast. Because I think we should always remember Uro. And that alternate art for Uro is so cool, and it's literally never going to see play. The legacy players aren't going to play with it. And that alternate art for Uro is so cool, and it's literally never going to see play. The legacy players aren't going to play with it. It's like a foil or whatever. They hate that stuff. But
it's going to be like people's least favorite thing to see at the commander table, for sure.
Oh, yeah. I forgot Uro lives on in Commander. That's funny. It's probably the only format where Uro might be fine. Who knows? Maybe at times that won't be true.
You're going to sit down with Drake Sasser to see CEDH game. Sit down. He's going to bust out his Uro, and you're like, God, I hate that thing, but it looks great. You know?
Yeah, it looks amazing. You're also not going to know what it is at first. You're like, oh, that looks like a cool card. What's that? And
it's going to be like waking up on Groundhog Day for the very first time.
Exactly. You can go there to support all of our sponsors. But let's move on to the main topic of this week's episode, the active improving at Magic. And so, Abe, when we talk about that sort of statement, what do we mean by the active improving in Magic?
Just Magic is such a big game. Better decisions, win more games. You want to just get better. And when it comes to improving in Magic, there's a lot of ways to do that. There's a lot of places like you might want to grow, you might need to grow. There's just a lot to know. And so kind of figuring out how you can do that.
100%. Yeah. It's one of the guiding lights of this show is, always improving, and kind of the act of like, we all have so much we can learn. We're all always working on something, even the great players like PV, back when Seth was the co-host of the show, he always had an always improving moment. I think that's really telling. that, Seth Banfield was like always working on something. And it's hard to be better than Seth. So there's always something to be going on. And the active improving at Magic is something that is really personal, right? And it's like your own goals and your own things. And there are things that we set for our own goals. And it doesn't need to be like, I'm going to qualify for all the Pro Tours and stuff like that. And setting your own goals is hyper important. Recently on the show, if you've been listening, I talked about how I wanted to really work and improve at limited and kind of get better at a limited format and try to understand that a bit more. And I did some of that with Abe off podcast, hanging out in Discord and stuff like that. And I've worked on that. And that's like a goal of mine in Magic. I have other goals and other things I work on as well. And I have, sometimes bigger goals. Like an example might be back in 2019, the last half of the year, I wanted to really lock up a buy going into 2020 for SCG. And so I made it my goal to end up in the top 64 on the leaderboard, which meant like I'm going to go to every event I can. I'm going to play every IQ I can. I'm going to do all these things because I have only, one result from the first half of the year, really. And so I need to catch up to everybody. And like you can set your own goals and you define your own success. Abe, when you talk about setting your own goals, and I kind of mentioned that sort of stuff, have you done that sort of thing before? Do you set kind of big goals, or are you someone who more like checks on goals as they go and kind of mention that sort of stuff? Have you done that sort of thing before? Do you set kind of big goals, or are you someone who more like checks on goals as they go and kind of comes back to them?
I used to like my relationship with goals is kind of it's not very concrete. Like I tend to think like I'm someone who doesn't really do New Year's resolutions too much because I think that like, making this arbitrary time where you want to like set this thing you want to do or you want to change is just kind of like it makes it this ceremonial thing it doesn't have to be. And I feel the same way about Magic. I used to do on Facebook back when that was what everyone used to talk to each other. I do this big end of year post where I kind of like summarized all the events I had played, all the things I had done, all the memorable moments that I could like really think off the top of my head. Just kind of like stream consciousness and then end it with like, what are my goals for the next year of Magic? This one was great. What's my next one? And like, like some of them were to like close more tournaments. Like I was top 8ing a lot. I wanted to win more. Some of them were top 8 a GP or an open, like, and sometimes I'll just have a whim where I'm like, you know what? I want to hit, for me, it's not ever hit mythics. I'm not a huge ladder guy, but like, it's just, it could be something as small as hit mythic or, feel proficient with a deck. And it's really just whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
Like a goal doesn't have to be so metric. It could literally just be like, feel confident. Like that's a great goal, I think. Feel confident playing a match of Magic in paper. I think there's a lot of people I know who are really good technical players or really good on paper and just aren't comfortable.
Yeah.
And like something like that is a very good goal to set for yourself if that's you. But mostly what I have to say about goals is that like they've got to come from something you like, you like want or need, right? Like you've got to know why it is that that's your goal. Like if your goal is that like, why do I want to qualify for Pro Tour? Because it's cool, because I want the money, like, or if it's I want to get better at drafting, like for you, like why do you want to get better at limited?
I want to get better at limited because I think it's really actually important in Magic, and I think there's a lot of things that I kind of naturally am pretty good at in limited, like combat math and things of that nature. I think comes really easy to me, and I've been able to like slide by on that limited. But things like evaluating cards early on in like a sealed pool or in a draft environment and like the context of how other people react to that is one that I think is not as well shaped for me. And so I want to get better at that so I can understand those things. I think that will apply to other areas. And I'm also someone who likes to play competitive Magic. And eventually there will reach a point where I'm going to have to play a limited event. I got really lucky. And before my Pro Tour became the Arena one, I was going to play a modern standard Pro Tour. And I was like, oh my gosh, I dodged the limited. We're lucky. We got so lucky on that. And that should not be a thing. Tour became the Arena one. I was going to play a modern standard Pro Tour. And I was like, oh my gosh, I dodged the limited. We're lucky. We got so lucky on that. And that should not be a thing that I'm thinking. I want to be able to be more proficient. And I have to start somewhere with limited. And obviously, like when the time comes for those events, I'll need to do a bunch there. But I can help sharpen those skills now and then port them to the specifics of that new format.
Yeah, and I think that if you're a listener right now and you're thinking about like, what are my goals? What should my goals be? You should try to find a goal that you could explain as well as Mason just explained that one. I think that's like, for me, when it comes to setting goals, that's how I like to feel about them. is like, why is it I want to do this? Like, why is this my goal? I know. Like, why is it that I spent time brewing today? Because I want to grow as a deck builder, because I think it's really important.
Yeah. And one thing I do want to say before going on is, I think that there's no real wrong way to approach what we're doing here. Like Abe kind of has like a more like not so concrete failure, quote unquote. And I like to think of things, while they are failures, they're just, I haven't reached it yet. So like if my goal was to, let's say I had not ended up finishing, middle of the pack for SCG for the one buy, right? And I had missed it. It'd be like, okay, I got really close. How can I improve and how can I work to make sure that goal happens next time? So I think setting things and being healthy and honest with yourself is important, because that's something that's definitely an easy trap to fall into in Magic, a negative self cycle, and setting goals and doing things and feeling like you never achieve anything, and just realize that it's a long time to sometimes achieve goals. Like if your goal is to make the Hall of Fame, right? I think that's a great goal, but you need to do a lot of other things along the way, and it's going to be like a 15-year thing. So like be prepared, But let's talk about how do we start on a goal. We kind of mentioned the beginning processes of like, all right, we figured out this goal that we want to do. And we kind of got like, all right, I want to be the limited guy so I can do these sort of things. And you want to like, so I can do these sort of things. And you want to like, you want to set the goal of like, hey, I really want to, work on the zombie deck and explore that thing. Are there any other things you do when starting a goal along that nature before you really hop into trying to achieve that goal?
I think that when you start a goal, like it's good to know how you're going to get there, right? You want to have a plan. Mm-hmm. I think that planning is like key. I think that, and if you don't set out, if you don't know how it is you're going to do it, if you don't have an idea of like, you say like, okay, I'm going to top 8 the next open in my hometown. And then you sit around and you're like, well, okay, I'm just going to like, how am I going to do it? When you set yourself that goal, if you didn't know, like, I'm going to test with these people, I'm going to practice this format, right? Like you should have an understanding of the steps. I think that that's like step number 1 for me is like, okay, this is my goal. How am I going to get there? Lay it out.
Yeah, I think that's super. This kind of goes along with like, how do we achieve this goal? And we're going to kind of hop into that. One thing that I think is important is you write it down somewhere, and it can be on your notes on your iPhone. That's where I do most of mine. But I always suggest people do pen and paper, since a lot of people that connects more with them, and write down like what your goal is, And like I have a pen and paper over here, and it was relearning modern. You hear me drop the pen. It's relearning modern sideboard, and I just put prowess at the top, and I've written things down so that I would like be able to learn more about prowess, because I want to get really good with prowess, right? And I want that to be like a deck I can fall back on, because I've played a lot of Amulet, but like I'm not like Edgar, right? Like I can't just pick up Amulet. I have to like really work on it. And so I want to have something that I can kind of fall back on. I want to get better at this also different strategy. And that's something that I'm working on as well. And so I got prowess stuff, and I have like goblins, Chalice versus me, and I put a sad face. And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot that goblins players all play Chalice now. And it's like blue-red spells, quote, mirror, like bringing taking actions to do this, right? But I think you can do that sort of thing with a lot of other stuff when it comes to achieving goals. And I think that's a great thing, right? Like maybe you want your goal to be, when SCGs and GPs come back, I want a top 16, one of my first 3 I go to, and I'm going to go to a bunch of them, right? Write that down and think about how are you going to achieve that goal. Are you going to make sure you're setting aside some time to practice every day? Are you setting aside some time to read content, that sort of thing? Are you going to make sure that you're watching stuff, staying on top of things? Are you going to practice new decks so you have a wider range when that time comes? Are you going to try and pick a deck and hope that it's good when the time comes? Like, how are you going to achieve those goals? And of course, listening to constructive criticism, you got to really think about what you're going to do to achieve those goals. And Abe, what are some things that you've done to help achieve yourself and your goals? Because I feel like this is a moment where we kind of have to use past lessons to kind of help listeners get a good idea of how they can do this themselves. Because it can be hard to come up with like, what am I supposed to do? Especially if like, I know when I first started, if I didn't have Trey to help me, there was not many people that I could talk to that had gone to the Pro Tour or done that sort of thing near me. And if they Trey to help me, there was not many people that I could talk to that had gone to the Pro Tour or done that sort of thing near me. And if there were people that I didn't feel like I could approach them and ask them that. And so it can be kind of hard to figure it all out on your own. It's like chess, right? Like everyone learns off them and they learn these new openings and these new things. And it's super important to learn from that. So what are some things that you've done to help achieve your goals?
I'll give, here's a good example. So when I was first like getting good, you know, like I was really leveling up. I had like just graduated high school, and I was like playing as much as I could, like hanging out with my friends who were like my core group. We were like all really improving. My friend top 8 at a limited GP. We were like all really good at this limited format. I had like a couple PTQ top 8s, and then like that group kind of dissolved a bit. I was working with new people, and like I set this goal, like I'm gonna make the Pro Tour 2 because I want to like I got to keep up with my buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Got to keep up with my friend who just went like a year or two prior, and had like was like kind of on it. You know, I wanted to like go to the same one as him. So I was like, I'm gonna do that, and I quickly realized I came in without a plan. I was like, I'm just gonna do it. I was like, I'm gonna manifest, and that doesn't really work. But I was working with some friends of mine, and it was just like not working. And I was like, all right, I need to make a plan now, because what I'm doing right now I know isn't working. Like I'm like, we're testing all these decks. I'm kind of like, I'm playing. It was like a standard RPTQ. I was like, I'm gonna like play this Jeskai Black deck. I think I'm like try to build it for like the field, and I was just like losing and in testing, and I was like trying to talk about it with these people, and it was just not. We weren't communicating well, and I was like, you know what? I've got to do something different. I'm going to talk to someone who I know I can trust. That's when I talked to, actually the first time I worked with Sukenik for an event was for this RPTQ, and I was like, hey, like, I think I'm going to learn this Rally the Ancestors deck from the ground up. Like, look at the best deck. I'm going to pour all my time I'm not working at the card shop into going home and playing Moto. That's the only thing I'm going to do. Like, I'm not going to play video games. I'm not going to like watch much TV. I only have one monitor at this time. So I'm like, you know, I'm going to just grind. I'm going to stream myself grinding. So if I like have time, I can go back and watch and like be critical for my mistakes. I'm going to talk to the people I know, and like, I'm just going to figure out just Rally the Ancestors. And I did. And it worked out great for me. But like without that plan, I probably would have just kind of like, you know, read some SCG articles, you know, like muddled around, swapped like 4 sideboard cards between the main deck or something, and then like kind of fallen flat. But like when you have a goal, especially a big goal, like your plan can change, but you always have to be cognizant of it. And if you're not cognizant of your plan, it really falls apart, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot, and that's great to hear that story of success and everything too, and have it work out. I think about one of the times where I really wanted to understand Amulet. That's one of the things that I had a goal of, like, I really like this deck. And it's funny. It's one of the first times I really did this with Magic, but it was like, okay, KCI just got banned. KCI was really strong. I was playing like It Were Spirits a lot of the time, and I was like, wow, I really shouldn't shy away from these decks that are quote-unquote hard or complex. They're generally really good, and my opponents have a hard time playing against them as well. And I looked at Amulet, and I was like, well, I already own a lot of these cards. I've played the Summer Bloom version a long time ago a little bit when I first started, and it's like, I should do this. This seems really strong, and I want to learn this deck. And if worse comes to worse, you know, I now know how to play against Amulet, you know, at the end of that, hopefully, and that will help me with whatever deck I decide to go play. And so I just like And so I just like wrote down on my phone, like, I want to learn Amulet Titan, and how are we going to do that? And it was like, watch all the VODs of everyone who's played Amulet on an SCG or a GP. So I just like would go through and watch, like, I've watched Will Pulliam and Edgar Magalhaes and Mac Dilks and Daryl Ayers. I don't know how many of the feature matches I've watched. I've probably watched them multiple times too, because I wasn't sure if I had seen them or not. You know, sometimes the humans versus Amulet matches really bleed together from that era. You know, like, or Jeskai versus Titan. At a certain point, you're like, wait, is this? No, I think he cast a Teferi. I'll just keep watching. I'll try and learn. And I had to backward engineer all of that. You know, it was a thing where I literally had no resource. And luckily, you know, I think it was kind of a meme or something at the time. I wasn't quite sure, because I, you know, didn't really know these people then. But it was like, they would post these Amulet, like, puzzles on Twitter, right? And it was right around the time I started playing Amulet. And it was perfect. And it was one of those things where it's like, figure this puzzle out. Like, figure out what you're out until you find the line. And then, like, if it takes more than an hour, then read the comments and try and figure out, why did we miss it and why didn't we figure this out? And another thing I did was just practice the mechanics. And so, hand to God, I remember one Christmas, I actually ended up staying here and did stuff with my brothers instead of going to see my grandparents. And I watched Gossip Girl for like 9 hours one day, and I just goldfished Amulet Titan literally the entire time I wasn't eating. I like ate dinner, ate breakfast or lunch or whatever, and then the rest of the time I was just literally shuffling Amulet and going through the act of picking up and tapping and learning it. Because I was like, mechanically, I need to make sure I'm doing these things correctly, you know? And so I had something on in the background. I kind of just did that and practiced, and like, I remember doing it, and I can't remember exactly. I remember thinking like, oh, I can do this in this situation. And just thinking about like, oh, these sort of things could come up if I was like in this sort of board state. That's good to know. And a deck like Amulet, you should really pour the time situation. And just thinking about like, oh, these sort of things could come up if I was like in this sort of board state. That's good to know. And a deck like Amulet, you should really pour the time into. And I remember Gottlieb was another big push in this, because on the game podcast at the Arena Decklist now, but at the time game, he talked about the more you put into Amulet, the more it will give you. We see these players perform with it and do so well, and that's like all they're really playing. You know, if you think you are of that caliber, want to be of that caliber, this seems like a great deck. And he pushed me, and then, you know, it led to my first open top 8 where, you know, I played Amulet Titan, and I got paired actually versus Edgar, Dilks, and Errors in the top 8, and I literally neck decked them from the week before. And so when it's open deck list, and we open up our deck list and we pass them to each other, and I can see like Edgar and Daryl both checking because it's Amulet, and they're like checking everything, and I just told them, I didn't know them at the time, I was just like, that's literally your deck from last weekend, but with this sideboard card, and I literally net deck you 3 every week, so I'm always a week behind. But that's what I would do. Because I just and that's none of that's exaggerated. I talked to Edgar about it. He's like, "Oh, that was you," because he just like, you know, we didn't really know each other at the time, but that literally happened. I literally said, I net deck you 3 every week because you're the smart ones and you know what you're doing, and I literally watch all your matches and study everything you do and try and figure it out so that I can learn. And that's the thing where like, I feel like I am not near like those guys' level, but I feel like I'm a pretty competent Amulet Titan player. And when I play against Amulet, and I've played against Dilks a couple times since then, I never feel lost in the matchup now. And I know that even if I never end up playing Amulet again, I am prepared for that sort of matchup and what they can do, assuming things don't change drastically between now and then. So that was the thing where it became like really like, okay, how can I study? And the thing I like a lot about that story is a lot of that is not me playing. Like, before I top 8 that open, I actually had very little. I think I played a couple Moto leagues, but not many because it was abysmal to play Amulet on Moto. And like, it's all things that are not part of the game. So I think one thing to take away from that, if you're listening, is that just because you don't have time to actually play games and like seriously like put it all in there, well, I think that's one of the best ways to get stuff out. There are other ways to do things. And there are other ways
if I can jump on that,
hop in.
When I was writing for Star City, one of the things I always tried to get across in my articles, for anyone who's listening who might have read them, you probably already know this, is that there's just so much more that you can get out of doing many other things. Usually for me, it was like, just read some deck lists. Like, go on Goldfish, look at the leagues, look at what people are playing, look at what people are trying, absorb that information, try to think critically about people's deck lists. But just in general, there's so many things you can do that are not sit down and jam games of Magic. And even if you've allotted time, like this is the only time I'm gonna get to play, like there's so many things you can do that are not sit down and jam games of Magic. And even if you've allotted time, like this is the only time I'm gonna get to play, like I have like 6 hours on a Saturday. It's the only time I'm gonna be able to play like Magic Online this week, or like Magic Arena this week before like what the Mythic Qualifier this weekend or something. If you're like Thursdays set aside for that, like you can get a lot out of the time you spend not playing Magic, just doing other things with Magic. There's so many ways to engage, so many ways to learn. And in the same way that people say like, you get diminishing returns from playing, it works backwards too. You get increasing returns the first amount of time you spend doing something. Right, like the first hour of your week that you spend taking the time to read over all the deck lists that did well in the challenges and how they're built, the first like hour you spend listening to a Magic podcast, and it's going to be the one you get the biggest gain out of. So if you're someone who plays a lot, I really do think that you should find time to like, even in that play time, to be like, okay, let's do some homework. And if you're someone who is the other way, which I know I am a lot of the time, like that was me a lot of 2019, because I was like doing school and, I just had like a completely booked schedule, traveling to all the opens, writing for Star City, and like holding down a 4.0 GPA. Like literally every second of my life was taken, and I was like, I don't have time to play Magic. I'll just do it. A lot of things off of like my ability to read the metagame and like read these deck lists and like construct a good list and then play off of my knowledge. Is that if I had spent another like, I don't know, like one night, if I'd stayed up like 2 or 3 hours later, like on like some night in a week and played a league during that time, I would have gotten so much more out of it. I would have made so many fewer mistakes in a week and played a league during that time. I would have gotten so much more out of it. I would have made so many fewer mistakes. Mm-hmm. So it's just something to remember, you know, like there's so much you can do that isn't playing games, and you don't need, like, you did all of that alone. Like, you didn't have, that was all publicly available. That's all YouTube, Twitter, and like
a dream.
Yeah, exactly. Like you could, you know, maybe like you could have like maybe had a Facebook group, like DM'd someone and like hoped to respond, but like there's a lot you can get done on your own. And if you don't know what to do on your own, you know, or you don't know where to start, just start somewhere.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things I always tell people, and this is like another example of a thing you can do, when like, oh, I don't really have time to play except for this lot thing, yada yada. I'm like, well, do you ever watch like a YouTube video like when you're at lunch, you know, where you're like, you watch a TV show or something? They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. One thing that I would do always leading up to an event is like, if I know I'm locked in for Amulet Titan, right? It's like, okay, how are they going to sideboard? What are they going to bring in and out? And I kind of figure that out in my head. And then I go when I find something where someone notable is talking about it, and I compare. And if it's like, okay, I got it right, that shows I have like a pretty good understanding of the matchup and what's going on. And if I got it wrong, it's like, okay, why did I think they were going to bring in Tormont script versus me? That doesn't make much sense. What fell apart? And it's like, oh, I'm overvaluing this Life from the Loam engine I have, or whatever, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I think that sort of thing is something you can very easily do while you're doing stuff like that. And it takes 10 or 15 minutes to just kind of look over 1 or 2 deck lists, compare them with, you know, the CFB, SCG article, whatever, see what Reduke would do in the versus you and Jund, and just be like, oh, cool, awesome, now I get that. And you don't need to dedicate these large chunks of time. You can do a lot of pocket sessions to help achieve your goals. And I think another thing to kind of mention here before we kind of start wrapping, the thing that I didn't mention, Abe, during all that, is that from the time I bought Amulet to play to my first like actual thing, like an IQ, where like I could win some amount of money on it, was like a 2.5 month period, where like there was a period where I only played at FNM sometimes, and I would goldfish it, and like I was watching and doing all this stuff for like 2.5 months. And I'm not even like really playing it that much because I can't play on Moda because it was driving me up the wall along with all my mistakes. And so it's like, okay, I can do these things and then start taking action for it. So except sometimes that the goal is going to take a long time. And depending on your goal, it might take a really long time with something like Magic. I think that's just important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, Magic is, you know, it's probably the most complicated game in existence. And there's a lot to know, and even the things that seem simple, like they are pretty difficult. There's a lot of really difficult things and there's a lot to know, and even the things that seem simple, like they are pretty difficult. There's a lot of really difficult things you're going to learn to do. Like, I don't know, the fact that like you could have some people who've like maybe played a handful of games of Magic and like, you know, have some really big degrees, and you're like, okay, what's the line here? And you could answer that question, and they can't, no matter how many degrees they have. You know, like it's just a thing you got to learn or figure out. And some people figure out really easily because they're like, they just see it or whatever. But you know, if finding the right Amulet Titan line, to take your example, like some people are like, oh, like yeah, you just do this because they understand the puzzle and they like get it. And some people are just like, I don't even know what's going on here. like we've got. What's a Gruul turf? Like, why is it easy mode? I don't even understand. Like,
I remember one of those with Amulet where like pulling him screen sharing and first to make his first land drop, and he says it's important that you do this, right? Like, it's correct that you activate Tribe Scout first because that gives them a chance to respond, right? And so they might do something. So you can put in that first land and then play the Garenbrig from your hand. Where if you go like Forest and then activate Tribe Scout, put Garenbrig in, they might be more heads up, and they also have more information and more chances to respond and do stuff. And it's like, you literally played this land in like the opposite order, and this is such an obvious thing, but like it like stumped me for a second. I had to be like, wait, what's wrong with this? And I had to like survey the board, and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. I put a trigger on this deck, of course, like those sort of things take a lot of time, and they can be really hard to notice it in some point. So, and that's with someone who kind of knows it telling you. So it can be really hard, but it's really rewarding too. I say all this, and it sounds like this like super hard to overcome. You're just like spending months in the dojo or whatever, but it's like a fun, rewarding process to improve on something. Like if you've played Valorant, when you first start playing Valorant, you are almost assuredly so bad unless you have years of CFGO's practice, which means you've been playing Valorant for years because it's just the same game. And then like you get like that first ace of yours, or that first time that like you understand how to use the abilities, and that like light up spark moment is so rewarding. And in Magic, I think it's the same way. And it can take a long time, but it's definitely worth it. Abe, wrapping up here, I think one of the things that maybe a lot of people are thinking about, or they maybe get to after they kind of done these steps that we talked about, is like, did I achieve my goal? Like, and how do we measure growth? And how do you tell people to kind of look at that? Because maybe someone sets a goal, Abe, of qualifying for the Pro Tour, and they spike it. Our friend Kyle made that his goal, and he qualified for the Pro Tour on like his second PTQ, a 300-person tournament. He just got there, and he was like, okay, but what do I do now? How do you measure and look at those sort of things?
I've kind of I'm just giving all of Secanic secrets. I'm just giving all of Secanic secrets away. But like I've kind of always thought of like improvement in general as this cycle of like you kind of spend a bunch of time being like, yeah, I kind of am like bad. I feel like I need to be better. I need to figure out what I'm doing wrong. And then you kind of figure all these things out slowly that add up, and then you're like, you start to feel more confident. You're like, okay, I think I'm like making some big strides here because something clicks with you, or you get a result, or like you make a really cool play, like you like top 8 a PTQ because you like in the win and in you have this really sick line that you figure out, or like you get the read on your opponent and you like like play in a way that's not the way you'd think. You do something that makes you feel like you've grown, and then you're like, wow, I know all these cool things. Like, how do I I'm going to do all these things with them now that I know them. And then you kind of like, it's this expansion of like, now you have a bigger world to play in, and then you hit the walls of it. And then you're like, well, now I feel like I'm stuck again, And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that you don't really realize it, but you're improving a lot more than you think you are, because what you're trying to do a lot of the time in Magic especially is you're trying to like plug holes,
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to like be like, I don't want to make these mistakes. And the less you make those mistakes, the less you're going to see yourself avoiding those mistakes. And so when you think about it and you're like, maybe take a snapshot of like the moment that you decide you need to work on something, and then be like, how different am I from then? Like if my goal is to make the PT, well, like what did it mean to make the PT? Was it just that I wanted to play a Pro Tour, or did I want to feel like a Pro Tour caliber player? When the Players Championship was first announced, like when it was coming back, long time ago, it feels like.
It is actually 2 years ago now.
Yeah, but I remember it was. I don't want to like. I'll call him. I don't care. So Dylan Han and I were both writing at the time, both select. He was the Monday slot and I was the Wednesday slot. And this announcement came, and I remember him saying something effective like, I'm making it my goal to qualify for the PC, and like I'm going to go hard for it and everything. And I mentioned in my goal in like I'm going to go hard for it and everything. And I mentioned in my goal in like my end of year article, which was just kind of like a bunch of stuff about a lot of this topic, just like if you want to get better, like this is some stuff I think you should try to do. Was like, I want my goal to be, rather than like I want to qualify for the Players Championship, because of course I would want to. Sounds great. Mm-hmm. Is that I want to play that caliber of Magic. I would like, results are here or there. Like I want to feel like I'm playing at the level I would need to make the PC every week. Like I want to be in there making good decisions week in, week out, in the game, out of the game. I want to just be like a full Magic machine, and I did not come close to that. Like I had like a couple tournaments where I was doing some really good stuff, and a couple tournaments where I was doing some pretty bad stuff. It happens. But like when you have there was SUG Cleveland where I started out undefeated on day one, and then my day falls apart on day two. But that morning, I was in bed with a copy of Dredge I'd borrowed from a friend for that event, and a humans list I'd built half asleep that morning based on the stuff I'd been reading online, based on the deck list I've been reading, with a full package that I constructed for all the matchups, a really, really good humans list. I was very happy with it, and I was I'm just going to play the humans list. And that was there's not another tournament where I think I've ever felt as an independent Magic player, I've showed up better.
Mm-hmm.
I put in the hours. I'd been putting in the hours with humans over time, and I the deck really well. I'd been doing all my reading. I'd been doing all my research. I knew all the matchups. I knew all the deck lists. I knew all the options. And there was something that I think it was Phyrexian Revoker clicked with me as okay, this actually does fix a lot of problems and is a really smart solution. I'm doing it. And then had an amazing finish. Ultimately, the way it went down was kind of sad, but I 9-0'd day one, clean sweep, and then top 16 or whatever. So
yeah.
When it comes to measuring success in your goals, you got to think back on the improvement you've felt, and sometimes the improvement you feel is the mistakes you don't make, and sometimes it's the things you accomplish. But I think it's just really important to if your thing is I don't want to make dumb mistakes anymore, or I don't want to misevaluate my role in a matchup anymore. When you stop misassessing your role in a matchup, you're not going to notice suddenly I've chosen that I'm the beatdown now, and and that was correct. That's not something you're ever going to think.
Yeah.
So, but when if you go back and watch your matches, you'd be a less experienced me, a less improved me would have just kind of jammed because they felt they needed to be I shouldn't jam this Jace because I want to leave up Cryptic Command. But and I'll have time later to cast Jace. And you just didn't understand that before, but now you're just without thinking all right, land go on my Cryptic Command turn, and then we'll see how it plays out. I'll have plenty of time. And that kind of growth is something where you'll lose a match with blue-white and you'll be man, I suck, I played so bad. But you didn't play bad. You've played so much better in that alone than you did when you set out. So
yeah, I think you really encompassed that really well, and I honestly don't have anything more to add. I kind of echo what Abe said, and if you heard that sort of thing and you've liked this conversation, you can definitely go also check out Abe's article like he talked about on Starcy Game Select. They keep all those articles in the archive, so if you just Google Abe Stein SCG, it should pop up with that one. So more on his thoughts on that topic there. That's going to do it for this week's episode. Abe, thank you so much for coming on and taking your time to talk about this topic. I think so more on his thoughts on that topic there. That's going to do it for this week's episode. Abe, thank you so much for coming on and taking your time to talk about this topic. I think you had a lot, and you had a lot of really great things to say, and I'm really glad we were able to have you for this episode.
Yeah, I honestly have had a great time. This is everything I thought it would be. I knew I wanted to be on a Magic podcast, and I've had a great time doing it. So, don't be a stranger to reaching out and having me on again. If the people want to find me.
Yes, of course. I was about to give you your time to shill. Shill, my man, shill.
If people want to find me, the best place is honestly twitter.com/morenothings, @morenothings on Twitter. I'm not really doing much in content these days. I have been thinking about, if you're someone who really wants to improve and, you want to put in a lot of time, I have been thinking about opening up the idea of coaching. If people are interested in that, down to have a conversation with anyone who listens who's to give it a shot. And I don't know, follow my Twitch, I guess. I don't really stream that much. I've been trying to stream the SUGs or whatever, but I'm just so inconsistent. I just want to do other things with my time sometimes,
No, that's fair. It's hard.
So how about you?
If you want to find me, you can find me at twitter.com @MasonEClark. You can find me at twitch.tv/TheMasonClark. If you go to YouTube, you'll find the VODs of all those Twitch streams uploaded there at youtube.com/MasonClark. I am in a thing where my channel is the biggest one with that name, but for some reason it doesn't pop me up every time, but some people say it does. So if you type in Mason Clark Magic, I pop up. So I suggest doing that for right now while I take over the algorithm. I need to pull more of the clout my way. So you can check out all the stuff there. You can find me each and every week writing for Card Kingdom on their blog, normally about Standard. So you can find me there every Thursday. This week is going to be more about the metagame going on, kind of the part 2 of the tier criticism. And if you want to follow the show, so you can keep up with everything going on with that, you can find us on our website at constructorcriticism.com. And you can also go to our Twitter at CCMTG, and make sure to check out the other shows on the network. Sam Black's Drafting Archetypes is a newest addition to the podcast network. Sam,
huge fan.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it.
Fan.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. I think Sam does an amazing job, and I've always thought Sam has one of the more interesting brains about things. And even though right now, I'm a limited guy. I'm a limited guy. I'm a burn guy. That's me. Always has been. Always will be. Even though I am those things, getting to hear the way he thinks about things is very interesting. And I will probably continue to listen to that, even if I fall off limited for a while, just because the perspective and way he thinks about things I think is so interesting and applicable to other areas of Magic. And so even if I didn't know what was going on exactly when he's talking about these archetypes, I think you can pull a lot per the episodes before Kaldheim, where I literally had never drafted Zendikar and I was listening to him talk about Zendikar, which admittedly was a little hard when the random uncommons came up. I'm like, is that the one with the flash? I think it is. He's implying I can do it with flash. That's probably fine. That's the one, and so check all that sort of stuff out. And once again, thank you so much, Abe, for coming on, and we'll see you all next week for another Constructed Criticism.